Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We'll get started now. This webinar is entitled Terrific Trees, How Trees Keep Water Healthy and Clean. This is the 8th webinar in our Environmental Matters webinar series. This series is brought to you by the City of Superior Environmental Services Division of Public Works. If you'd like to watch any of the previous 7 webinars from this series, they are all archived on our website, www.ci.superior.wi.us/webinar. If anyone has any questions throughout the webinar, please let me know. You can type it in or you can raise your hand. This is the last webinar for which you'll be registered to win a rain barrel. So we will be doing that drawing after the webinar, and we will let you know if you win. So today we'll be talking about trees and why they're important in stormwater management and in the city in general. My name is Jillian, and I will be presenting the webinar. So let's get started. So the urban forest, that's the first thing we're going to talk about. When you think of a city or the word urban, you probably don't think of a forest. You probably think of concrete, roads, buildings, houses, parking lots, things like that. When you think of a forest, you probably think more of, trees and ferns, and there's some place where you hike and some place with trails and not some place like a city. This is probably what you think of when you think of a forest. So that's a pretty, traditional forest. That's what you would think of with, the big trees, some undergrowth. That looks like a forest. But the forests that we spend most of our time in probably look a little bit more like this. So this is what the urban forest looks like. And this isn't actually Superior, but it's a good example. So urban forests are made up of all the trees and vegetation in a city. So that would be, trees in your yard, bushes, trees along the boulevard, and anything in the parks. Superior's urban forest also includes the municipal forest, which is more traditional, like we said, the forests that you think of hiking in and mountain biking in, snowshoeing, things like that. So Superior has kind of a hybrid where we have, the paved areas with the boulevard trees and the yard trees and things like that, but also that great big tract of forest that kind of fits our definition of what we think of as a forest. We also have, according to Douglas County's website, 41 acres of Douglas County-owned forest in the city of Superior. So we have quite a bit of forest here, which is pretty cool because of all the things that the urban forest will actually do, which we'll talk about in a bit. Some cities are actually forming part of their identity on their urban forests. So for example, Atlanta likes to call itself the city in the forest because they have so many trees in such a big city that if you look at pictures of it, it actually looks pretty neat. So the reason that cities are planting trees throughout is because they do a lot of things for us, and we'll talk about that on our next slide. So why is the urban forest important? It provides us with a lot of different kinds of benefits. So some strictly human benefits, I guess, would be increased home valuation. If you have a mature tree in your yard, your home value actually increases by 7 to about 19%. So you could get more money from your house when you sell it just because you have a mature tree there. Homes that have trees also sell more quickly than homes without trees in their yard. Better business profits can result from an urban forest or the presence of trees. So businesses with trees near them have about 12% higher income than businesses that don't. So those are some pretty good economic benefits. Another thing is energy savings. So trees, as you know, lower local air temperatures. So if you're sitting under a tree in 90-degree weather, it's going to be a lot cooler than if you're sitting on pavement or in an unshaded area. So trees help save energy by shading your home. They also cool the local air by through transpiration. Another way that they aid with energy savings is during the winter, trees will block wind, so your house will actually stay warmer. So it keeps it warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer, which is great. Another thing that trees do for us is reduce noise. If you ever drive down a highway, you might see houses set back from the highway with a nice strip of evergreens usually along the road, and I'm sure that's for privacy as well. But trees can also reduce noise, and they can reduce noise by 5 to 10 decibels, or about 50%. So the way that that works is that the trees are planted close to the noise source. It works better that way. They reduce the intensity of the sound waves, and it muffles the sound. Another thing trees can do for us in our city is provide safer streets. Drivers tend to slow down when they are on tree-lined streets as opposed to streets that don't have any trees on them. They also, which is important to us right now heading into construction season, can make pavement last longer. Some people might think this is counterintuitive because you think, you know, a big tree, the roots might make the pavement pop up, things like that. But because trees will shade asphalt, it actually makes it last longer. So a binder in the asphalt breaks down as the temperature increases. So then it will crack and water can be let in, and then it's pretty much in need of repair. So the trees will shade and cool the asphalt, and then not as much will break down, and they'll last a little bit longer. So one study that I was reading about said that the cost of maintaining a stretch of road covered by trees versus not covered by trees costs 58% less. So it really can help with our roads too. So trees do a lot of good things for people. We'll talk about some other things that trees do. So the urban forest can also provide ecosystem services, which, you know, regular forests provide too, but when they're in a city, they do a little bit of the same thing that they do in the less developed areas. So ecosystem services are resources or processes that provide us with benefits, and there are different ways to measure these benefits. One way is through avoided cost, so saying, if we didn't have these trees to do this, how much would it cost us to build something that would do it instead? Replacement cost, which is saying, if we cut down all these trees, how much would it cost us to rebuild what they're doing for us? Another way is contingent valuation, which is getting people to say, you know, this is how much I would pay just to have these trees here. So there are different ways to value ecosystem services, but they all do something for us. So the first thing, energy savings, we already talked about that. Another thing that trees do is sequester carbon, which has been really important in recent years and the topic of a lot of discussion with rising carbon dioxide levels. So trees actually absorb carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. Another thing that they do is they filter air pollutants. Trees will absorb pollutants in their leaves, or they will dissolve on leaf surfaces. They can also store pollutants in their bark. The things that are especially important to us that we'll focus on here are erosion reduction and reduced stormwater runoff. So those are both things that the urban forest can help with. So trees in stormwater management. Leaves and branches can decrease erosion by reducing the impact of rain on soil. So when you think of a raindrop falling and hitting the soil, you think that's probably not a big deal. It's not going to cause a mudslide. But if you think of all the raindrops that are falling at the same time and hitting that soil, that's a lot. And then you think of that over several hours in a rainstorm, we're having a lot of erosion at that point. So leaves and branches can reduce that impact and make it so the raindrop doesn't hit the soil quite as hard. And the way they do that is by, if the raindrop falls and it hits that branch or that leaf, then it could either stop, which would mean that less rain is falling to the ground, or it could actually just slow it down. So it could hit it and keep going, and that raindrop still falls on the ground, but it's moving slower because it was stopped by the by the leaves and the branches. Another thing that trees can do is capture water and sediment and slow them down, decreasing erosion. So that's another way to decrease erosion. Sometimes the roots, you'll see them poking out of the ground. When water is hitting the ground, it can get trapped there instead of moving along and running right into a storm drain or a river or something like that. Roots absorb some of the rain. Branches and leaves, as I said, intercept rain. They also will absorb that rain through transpiration, or if the water stays on the leaves, it will evaporate, or at least some of it will evaporate. So trees do a lot of good things for us in stormwater management. Trees also increase organic material, so fallen leaves, when leaves fall in the fall, that organic material can end up in the soil eventually, and that improves the soil structure and water holding capacity. So the soil can actually hold more water because of the tree, which is pretty great, and then the tree can use that water as well. Stormwater pollution can be decreased by nutrient uptake in roots. So if there are a lot of pollutants with nutrients and there are trees, the trees can take up some of those nutrients rather than having them run into the lakes and streams and potentially leading to algal blooms and things like that. So we'll just look at this link quickly about, it'll show us the difference between a city with a lot of trees and a city with not very many. All right, so we have, this is from the Arbor Day Foundation, we have our trees tame stormwater. So this shows you what it's like with few trees, and you can click on these little things. Overwhelmed sewer systems can lead to untreated sewage being swept into waterways. Upgrades are expensive. And then you can click and see how trees can help. And this is just www.arborday.org. So it shows the different things, the different areas of the city, and what it's like without trees. And then you can move this slider over to abundant trees, and it shows you what happens with the abundant trees. And I mean, it just looks nicer, but it has a lot of other benefits as well, and you can click through and see what those benefits are. So we'll go back to the slideshow now. All right, so if you want to check that out afterwards, you can. It's pretty cool. It's interesting to read about. All right, so we'll talk some more about the urban forest and stormwater management. As population increases, so does impervious surface. And impervious versus pervious surface is something that we talk about here quite a bit. Impervious surface is a surface where the water cannot soak in. So something like concrete or your roof, hopefully. You wouldn't want your roof to be pervious. Impervious surfaces are a sign of development, basically. So as we build parking lots and things like that, we have a lot more impervious surface. Pervious surfaces are where the water can sink in. So things like your lawn and wetlands and non-paved areas. So impervious surfaces, we want less of those, because the more impervious surface there is, the more water from rain runs off into storm drains and pollutes our lakes and streams. So we really want to decrease that. And in Wisconsin, there was almost 1 acre of development for each new resident. So every new person that moves to the state of Wisconsin, there was an extra acre of development. And obviously not each person builds an acre worth of development, but it's just the average amount. So that's a lot of impervious surface that we're bringing into the state, and that would mean a big increase in stormwater runoff. Development impacts can be mitigated with natural vegetation, so we're using those trees and building up our urban forest with more vegetation to prevent as much impact from the development. So we'll talk about that a little next. So this just shows with development the difference in what happens. So there's more, with less development, there's less runoff, there's more deep infiltration. And you can see that right here where it says natural ground cover. over here that says 10 to 20% impervious surface. And you see the runoff increased a lot with just a little bit more impervious surface. So we try really hard to promote pervious surfaces and, keep vegetation so that we don't have as much runoff. And if you look down here with 75 to 100% impervious surface, there's a lot of runoff, hardly any infiltration, and not as much evapotranspiration going on. So we really would like to see things as close to this natural ground cover as possible. And one way that this is done is through low impact development. Low impact development, or LID, are practices that mimic or preserve natural drainage processes, and that's the definition from the EPA. It's to try and keep processes as close as possible to a natural state. So even though, there might be a subdivision going up, we're trying to keep it so that things are still working the way they would before that subdivision was put in, or something like that. It uses different sizes and types of infrastructure than traditional development. Some things that it uses are like bioswales, wetlands, things like that. It saves money and also increases property values. So it can be expensive up front, but it does save money over the long run. We also have an archived webinar about low impact development from April at our website. So some other things that trees can be used for, besides just planted along streets and in your yards, is they can be used for low impact development purposes. So it says here bioswales, and that's a kind of shallow channel for water to run along. Trees can actually be added to bioswales. You see them a lot where they're grassy, but you can add trees to them to increase the benefits of them. Other sorts of low impact development type things, you could have a forested filter strip in a parking lot. So having a strip of vegetation in a parking lot where water can go instead of going off into the storm drains, you would have this vegetation strip with some trees that could take up the vegetation and absorb some more of that, or trees that could take up the water, and absorb it. And those have been found to be pretty helpful. But the one thing that we need to think about is the fact that trees can't absorb all of our water. We still have a lot of paved surfaces, and trees aren't great at dealing with large rain events. They're much better at intercepting water during small events and not intense events. So things where it's like an inch of rain over 2 days instead of an inch of rain over 2 hours. Trees are much better at the 2-day scenario. And they're also better for water quality than flooding. So trees do a lot more for helping with water quality than they do for preventing flooding. So they're not the ultimate solution to stormwater. We still have to do our part too, but trees can help us out. So if we're planting trees and having low impact development, that can help a lot, but it won't cure all of our problems. Basically, we still need to be really careful of the kinds of things that are going into the storm drains. So what kinds of things are happening here? The first thing is Superior is a Tree City USA, and that's through the Arbor Day Foundation. Tree City USA's, there are 3,400 communities that are Tree City USA's, 135 million people, live in a tree city. And what you have to do to be a tree city is maintain a tree board or a department that deals with trees, have a tree ordinance, spend at least $2 per capita on urban forestry, and also have an Arbor Day celebration. So that's what you have to do to be a Tree City USA. We also have boulevard trees along the streets. We have a tribute tree program where you can dedicate a tree to someone, and that application deadline is by December 1st. And currently with the Tower Avenue construction, they are putting in tree trenches, and those are trenches with trees in them with engineered soil. so that they'll absorb more of the stormwater and slowly release it. So those are just some things that are happening in Superior. So here are just some sources quick. All right, well, thank you for attending. That's actually the end of our webinar. I hope you learned a little bit more about urban forestry and trees. So everyone who attends this webinar and has attended any of the webinars in the past, starting in February, which is when we began the series, will be entered into a drawing for a free rain barrel provided by the Walmart Foundation. Check out our upcoming webinars. So our next webinar is June 4th. That's next Tuesday at 12 p.m. It's called Where Do I Take It? And we will be discussing e-waste and hazardous waste, why they're a problem, and what you can do with them. And our next one will be June 25th at 12 p.m. Most Wanted Aquatic Invasive Species. Oh, sorry about that. And you can see on here a few more that we have coming up. So thank you for attending. We hope you attend again. And if you have any questions that you did not think of while you were watching the webinar, feel free to contact us at 715-394-0392. Thank you.